Alright mates, how's it going? In today's video, episode 5 of Day of the Dragon by Richard A. Knack. Let's go! He had nothing to do with the explosion. Why would he do something like that? He's a wizard. They care nothing about the lives and livelihood of others. Farisa knew full well of the prejudices that the Holy Order held towards magic, so she knew there was no point in arguing. But as an elf, she'd grown up around magic, even knew a little bit herself. Wizards weren't bad people. Sure, Rhonin was reckless, bit of a jerk, but he'd already risked himself once to save her from the dragon. If he truly didn't care about the lives of others, he would have just left her behind, buggered off to Asic, and never looked back. And if he's not to blame, then where has he gone? Why was there no trace of him in the rubble? If he was innocent of this, his body would have been there. No, this foul work is his fault, mark my words. So what? We're going to hunt him down like an animal, Farisa thought. That seemed to be the plan, considering Duncan had summoned 10 of his best to ride with them whilst they searched. Perhaps it was goblin sappers. They're well versed in sneaking up to fortresses and setting off deadly charges. No, this region has been swept clean of any trace of the Horde, goblins especially. All evidence points to Rhonin, my lady. Farisa sighed. Rhonin was indeed the most likely source of the destruction, but she still couldn't believe it was him. He'd seemed so dedicated to fulfilling his mission. Setting off an explosion at a paladin's fortress and becoming a fugitive wasn't going to make that any easier for him. No, if they found Rhonin, she was going to need to do everything possible to stop Duncan and his men from running the guy through without first hearing his side of the story. But several hours of fruitless searching later, let's make camp. While I do not expect trouble, it shall do as little good to go wandering through the dark. With eyesight superior to that of her companions, Farisa considered continuing on by herself, but then thought better of it. If the paladins found Rhonin without her, he was done for. So, she sighed, continuing to sweep the surrounding territory with her eyes, hoping to somehow spot the guy. He's nowhere about, Lady Farisa. I can't help looking, my lord. Well, we'll find the scoundrel soon enough. We should hear his story first, Lord Centurus. It's only fair. The paladin commander shrugged. He will be given his chance to repent. Repent, meaning his guilt was already decided. And as soon as he'd done so, he'd be escorted back in chains and executed. Farisa then excused herself from the rest of the group in order to avoid saying something she might regret, and as she slipped in among the trees, she again felt the temptation to continue to search on her own, and then had a little flashback to a time shortly after her induction into the Rangers. Always so eager to go rushing off and handle matters on your own, Farisa? With such impatience, you may as well have been born a human. Keep this up and you will not be among the Rangers for very long. Well, that was a crap flashback. Despite the skepticism of many of her tutors, Farisa had prevailed and risen to the top of her class. It's amazing how much of a motivator people doubting you can be, and how great it feels to make those doubters eat their words. But if Rhonin was dead, then she failed her first ever assignment, meaning those doubters were in fact correct. And that idea made her feel sick to her stomach. However, a sudden gust of wind interrupted those thoughts, and Farisa stumbled a little bit. She then quickly hurried back to camp to see bedrolls and other objects strewn about, but the knights themselves were unharmed. What the hell was that? No idea, my lady, but it strikes me that no normal wind blows in such a manner. Roland, double the guard. Aye, my lord. Christoph, Jacob, get... Roland's voice cut off with such abruptness that both Duncan and Farisa half expected him to keel over with an arrow stuck in his head. But he was simply staring at a dark bundle lying amidst the displaced bedrolls. A dark bundle gradually recognisable as Rhonin. He looked pale and still, and in the torchlight it was difficult to see whether he was breathing or not. But as Farisa knelt down and reached towards his face, his eyes flew wide open and startled everyone. Nice to see you again, Ranger. Fool of a wizard! You can't just up and vanish after good men have died, reappear in our midst and then fall asleep. Duncan then reached down, intending to shake the wizard awake, only to let out a girlish squeal the moment his fingers touched the guy. Some sort of devilish unseen fire surrounds him. Despite Duncan's warning, Farisa had to see for herself, and sure enough, as her fingers touched Ronin's clothes, she too felt some weird warmth emanating from them. Nothing so intense as to warrant the girlish squeal from Lord Centurus though. However, she pulled her hand away and nodded. She wasn't going to embarrass the guy in front of his men. One of the knights then started to pull his sword from its sheath. No, Wexford. The Knights of the Silver Hand do not slay a man in his sleep. It would stain our honour. We'll post guards for the time being, and return in the morning. One way or another, justice will be served once he awakes. I'll stay. No one else needs to. Forgive me, my lady, but your association with... Farisa straightened and stared Duncan straight in the eyes. What, you think I'll help him flee again? Of course not. You have my permission. But to do so all night without relief, that is my choice. Would you do any less with one left in your charge? She had him there. The paladin commander hesitated for a moment before finally shrugging, and then turned to the rest of the warriors and ordered them all to bugger off. And within a few moments, the ranger and the wizard were alone. Farisa then examined Rhonin as best she could without touching him. His robes were torn in places, his face covered in tiny scratches and bruises, but other than that, he seemed fine, apart from his facial expression. He looked absolutely drained, exhausted, handsome. Wait, what? The ranger shook that last thought away quickly. Rhonin's sudden appearance was a bit questionable, although if he had used magic to somehow transport himself to the midst of their camp, that would have likely taken quite the effort, which would explain why he was now comatose. But no, for some reason that didn't ring true for Farisa. She couldn't shake the feeling that Rhonin had been taken by someone, and then tossed back once the kidnapper got what they wanted. The only question was, who the hell could have done such a fantastic thing, and why? The following morning, Rhonin woke up knowing that everyone was against him. Well, maybe not everyone. The elf might be alright, but everyone else, definitely against him. He exhaled slightly, so as to not alert anyone to his consciousness. He needed a few moments to collect his thoughts and figure out how he was going to handle this. The first questions they'll probably ask are, did you cause the explosion? And where did you go afterwards? But he knew he couldn't delay any longer, so he did an overly dramatic stretch and pretended to wake up. Back among the living, are we? We'll see how long that lasts. He's only just opened his eyes. Give him time to eat breakfast before you question him. I will deny him no basic right, milady. But he shall answer questions during his breakfast, not after. Rhonin propped himself up to see Duncan's angry face. I'll answer as best I can. But yes, only with food and water in my stomach. And so, Rhonin was given some rations to eat, which he ate with gusto, because for some reason he felt like he'd been starved for a week. But as he wolfed down the food with little regard for manners, the paladin commander grimaced and watched on with distaste. And then, the questioning began. The time for confession is at hand, Rhonin Redhair. You've filled your belly, now empty the burden of sin from your soul. Tell us the truth about your misdeed on the keep wall. I'll tell you what I know, which is to say not much at all, my lord. I stood atop the keep wall, but the fault of the destruction isn't mine. I heard an explosion, the wall shook, and one of your tin warriors had the misfortune to fall to his death, for which you've my sympathy. Duncan stroked his chin, looking as if he was fighting with every fibre of his being not to lose his temper. Your story already has holes as wide as the chasm in your heart, wizard, and you've barely even started. There were witnesses who saw you casting magic just before the devastation. Your lies condemn you. No, you condemn me, just as you condemn all my kind for merely existing. Yes, I cast a spell, but only one designed to communicate along distances. I've sought advice from one of my seniors on how best to proceed with my mission, a mission that has been sanctioned by the highest powers within the Alliance. His words bear truth, Duncan. I see no reason why he would have caused such damage, and I will meet any man, including you, in combat, if that's what it takes to restore his rights and freedom. Lord Centrus looked disgruntled at the thought of having to face Farisa in battle, and then glared back at Rhonin. Very well. You have a staunch defender, wizard. On her word and bond, I will accept that you are not responsible for what happened. But I would hear more about your experience during that time, especially the part about how you came to be dropped in our midst like a leaf fallen from a high tree. Rhonin sighed. He'd been dreading this bit. I'll try to tell you all I know. Again, the weary wizard described his movements from the dinner table to the wall, his attempt to contact his patron, followed by the sudden explosion. I can't prove it beyond doubt, but it sounded like a charge being set off. Impossible. Duncan, perhaps the dragon that pursued us earlier. Maybe it brought 1 or 2 goblins with it. They're small, wiry, certainly capable of hiding for a day or two. That would explain much. I suppose it would. And if so, we need to be doubly vigilant. Goblins know no other pastimes than mischief and destruction. If they truly are the culprits, then they will certainly strike again. Rhonin continued, explaining that he'd then cheesed it into a nearby tower, but then paused, knowing for certain that Lord Centrus would find his next words questionable at the very least. Something seized me, My lord, I don't know what it was. It took me up as if I were a toy and whisked me away from the devastation. It held me so tight I couldn't breathe. I must have passed out. And that's it? That's all you know? In a nutshell. You've told us nothing, wizard. Nothing of worth. If I thought for one moment... Duncan noticed a slight shift by Verisa, making him pause mid-sentence. But alas, I've given my word and taken that of another. We're already en route to Asic. I see no reason why we shouldn't quickly move on and get you to your ship. We leave in 1 hour. Be prepared, wizard. And with that, the commander turned and stomped off, once again leaving the wizard and the ranger alone. Will you be well enough to ride? Besides exhaustion and a few bruises, I seem in one piece. Thank you, Verisa Windrunner. Without you, that definitely would have turned into an inquisition. It's my duty. I took an oath to my masters that I would see you to your destination. Better ready yourself, Master Rhonin. This will be no mere canter. We have much time to make up. Verisa then left Rhonin to his own devices. The ranger had no idea just how right she was in that last statement. The journey to Asic was not going to be an easy gallop, and not just for the sake of time either, because Rhonin had not been completely honest in his previous answer to Lord Centurus. He hadn't lied, just failed to mention a particular conclusion he'd drawn. He didn't know who'd set the charge. That probably was goblins, but he didn't care. No, what bothered him was the giant hand that had saved him from the collapsing tower. It was no human hand. It had scaled skin and wicked curved talons. It was a dragon that had rescued him from certain death. And Rhonin had no bloody idea why.